the positive sentiment on AI is only 20%, which means 80% of people see AI as a negative to their life.
Once again, how much? 80%? 80% are negative?
80%.
Wow.
Yes, 80% are negative and 20% are positive. Well, maybe a little. There's some neutral in the middle.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more negative right now than there is positive, and I think that's really a bad sign, and it's a sign of both the wrong narrative that's being pushed by the AI leadership, as well as the news as coverage of all the layoffs that are going on, as well as the energy price increases that are coming because of data centers, the inflation that's happening, and everybody blaming AI for a lot of these things.
Hello. Let's talk about Big Bang Tech Report. This is our new episode, and we will talk about the AI power game, about Trump, about Xi, about Google, and about Europe's choice. And I'm very happy that Alvin Graylin is here in our show. Happy to see you, Alvin.
Yeah, good to see you again, Jens. We've been off for about 3 weeks because we were both traveling, but I think there's lots to talk about today.
Yeah, you were traveling a lot, and you have been in Europe, you have been in Greece. What did you do in Greece? What is happening there?
So last week I was at the Delphi Economic Forum, and gathering of a lot of both state leaders as well as thinkers in Europe and actually around the world. So it was interesting to hear the perspective of what people are seeing and what they're concerned about. And it's surprisingly quite different than what the topics were at Davos just a few months ago. I think the Iranian war has really changed people's perspective of both reliance on the U.S. as well as the relationship with other countries around the world, and also technology sovereignty, energy sovereignty, even food security, were all, as well as defense, were all major topics that was talked about this week.
And what is your takeaway from Greece?
My takeaway is that Europe is a little bit confused. It's still not sure what it needs to do. There's a lot of debate internally. Some are still hoping that when Trump leaves, things will go back to normal. And I think there's also a faction that says we cannot rely on the U.S. anymore. We have to be independent, and on all those fronts that we just talked about. And I think the second group probably makes more sense. But I think this region takes time to make decisions, because when you have 27 countries trying to do anything, it takes time.
Yeah, but we are asking ourselves, will it shape the AI future, or will it read the press release after America and China has made the deal? How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the big topics is how can Europe play a role? And I think the ones who are saying, hey, we can be a leader in AI in Europe, in terms of innovation and invention, I think they probably are heading down the wrong road. There just isn't the resources, both in terms of chips or energy or essentially human talent to do all of that. But what does make a lot of sense is working with open source community, because that's a 3 million person deep community around the world that is building AI and leveraging what's available. And there are some very, very capable models that are coming out of both US, China, and Europe in this space. So rather than trying to reinvent and create something amazing, why not work with that community?
Mm-hmm. When you hear the keywords tech restrictions, chips, tariffs, trade, what do you think about it? What will happen in the future in a few days?
So in a couple of weeks, there's going to be a meeting between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump in Beijing.
And, you believe it will happen? It will happen, this meeting, or it will postpone?
Yeah, I think it will. It was postponed last time because it happened kind of right at the beginning of the Iran war. But this one, I think Trump wants to have some good news to talk about. He wants a win. He wants a deal. So there's definitely a lot of things at stake right now. Both the the tariffs, there's the export control issues. Recently, yesterday, I think, or maybe the day before, Manus just had their deal revoked by the Chinese government, saying that they need to the acquisition by Meta is now blocked, so they have to unwind that whole deal. And I think that's really more of a game in a pond between the U.S. and China to say, here's another leverage that I have, and it's a signal to Chinese companies to say, hey, be careful about skirting the rules to go out of the country, right? And to be fair, I think that the U.S. have actually done similar things in terms of blocking Chinese from buying American companies. There's been 60 to 80 block deals over the last 10 years. This is the first time Chinese has actually blocked one of the U.S. acquisitions of a by American company. Right? So I think it's going to be interesting.
Understand it. You can understand it, and you can say, okay, that's pretty normal that this will happen.
I think it's normal, and actually it's surprising that they've waited this long to leverage that. Essentially that game piece in this overall negotiation. So same as the rare earth thing. They had that rare earth piece to play, or the card to play, for a long time, and they didn't play it until just earlier last year. So I think there will be some positive news that comes out of it, because both sides want to show something good, and there's going to be multiple meetings later on this year between these two leaders, and they are going to be setting the agenda for the rest of the world, at least in the near term.
Yeah. So what do you expect? What will happen there? Is there something that you say, okay, something big or something small?
I think they're going to bring a number of U.S. corporations to China. They're going to get some trade deals. They're going to buy more soybeans and planes and chips and other things, and it'll look like a big number from the U.S. perspective, and the Chinese will probably get concessions on trade restrictions and other things. So I think both sides have been talking for a while. The U.S. have actually definitely been a little bit less prepared. I've talked to people on both sides, and it feels like a lot of things are very last minute from the U.S. Group that's going.
Do you think that Nvidia, Jensen Huang, will throw a big party after Mr. Trump was there? Because they are suffering. They can't sell all their chips to China, and that this summit that they will solve the problem?
I think there probably will be some movement. In fact, if you look right now, there was supposed to be, even at the beginning of this year, there was a lifting of restriction on the H200s.
Yeah.
But up to now, there has not been a single chip shipped to China legally yet. So the fact that these
illegal.
No, well, I mean, illegally or side gray market, I'm sure many chips have been sold or at least shipped in, smuggled in. But the fact that that when that restriction was lifted and no real sales has happened, I'm sure Jensen's not particularly happy about it. But I he's been very vocal the last couple months of trying to say why China, why the U.S. needs to give China at least kind of one generation back chip, because it allows the U.S. Technology stack to continue to be used.
But if he starts to talk, he praises all the time the president of the United States, and then he is talking, and I think that's, for us, it's really incredible to see what the CEOs are doing first with the politics to have more.
I mean, I think that this is unfortunate, but it feels like this is kind of what's required these days. That some leaders' egos are sometimes more important than the reality of the business. So
but you have I've read some headlines, riots or something like that, Molotov cocktails. In San Francisco to the house of Sam Altman, and that especially the Generation Z, that they are not convinced that AI is a part of their world, and that they are happy with what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is actually a really big problem, and probably a bigger problem in the U.S. than almost anywhere else in the world. Right now, the positive sentiment on AI is only 20%, which means 80% of people see AI as a negative to their life.
Once
And
again, how much?
even though
80%? 80% are negative?
80%.
Wow.
Yes, 80% are negative and 20% are positive. Well,
Yeah.
maybe a little. There's some neutral in the middle,
Yeah.
but there's a lot more negative right now than there is positive, and I think that's really a bad sign, and it's a sign of both the wrong narrative that's being pushed by the AI leadership, as well as the news as coverage of all the layoffs that are going on, as well as the energy price increases that are coming because of data centers,
Yeah.
the inflation that's happening, and everybody blaming AI for a lot of these things. So it's a problem that needs to be addressed by the government right now, and also by some of these private companies. In fact, I think tomorrow there's going to be a big session where Bernie Sanders, one of the Democratic senators, is going to hold a town hall meeting, essentially, at the Capitol building,
Mm.
about this topic. So it's something that's in the news almost every day now, and
Yeah.
it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, but yeah, we have some experts, and they ask for a CERN for AI. What is that? Can you explain it for us or our audience?
Yeah, so actually, the CERN for AI concept has been around for a couple of years. It was also I discussed this in my Beyond Rivalry paper at the end of last year,
Yeah.
my Stanford paper. But the idea is that rather than having each country make their own AI and try to win at everything, we should try to consolidate resources, just like CERN did with particle physics.
Yeah.
We don't have a particle collider in every country.
Yeah.
So where you have essentially a neutral party, like Switzerland, where you can everybody invests hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, and when the results come out from this, it's shared with the world. And I actually think that that's really the right process or methodology to build AI, because when you do that, then you turn AI into a global public good.
Yeah.
Right now, AI is being built as either a advantage for a certain company to win the market, or a weapon for domination by a country
Yeah.
to win in geopolitics. And when you do that, you're essentially duplicating efforts across all of these labs. You're duplicating energy build and data center builds, and you're splitting the human resource. So if we can actually, if Europe actually can take a bigger role, I think this could be a place where Europe doesn't have to be on the sideline, doesn't have to wait. They can actually help to unite the resources of the world around a common cause.
But we are not used to play a bigger role. If you watch Iran right now, if you watch other things, AI, it's always that we are reacting, that we are not moving forward right now. And once again, or one question again, if people are not familiar with CERN, what's special with CERN? What is for you very interesting? What's going on in the Switzerland?
I mean, I think well, CERN is something that's been around for many decades, but it is the largest particle collider. And one of the things outside of the particle physics side, one of the things that came out of CERN was actually the World Wide Web, right? So we wouldn't have the internet and the World Wide Web without what was some of the things that came out of CERN. So I think that this is even though Europe has played a kind of a background role, the fact that it is seen as a neutral party between U.S. and China allows it to be a connector, a bridge, and the fact that it has so much talent in that's in Europe, that is separated between all these countries. Now you can actually put them together and maybe bring some of the international talent in as well. And this also maybe allows international the countries to then invest into Europe to build some infrastructure that is much needed right now, because Europe is way behind in terms of compute infrastructure versus the U.S. So there's a lot of benefits of doing this, and not to mention reducing global conflict, right? So which I think is a benefit not only to Europe but really to the world.
Yeah, If we have a look at the AI engines, there is nothing that Europe is contributing. We see right now that China is doing something with DeepSeek. What's going on with DeepSeek, and where do you see the race right now?
Yeah, so I mean, this is the interesting and also frustrating thing about AI is right now, every few days there's a brand new release of something amazing, right? And
Yeah.
we've had over the last 2 weeks, we've had the DeepSeek 4 V4, which people have been waiting for a very long time. We've had the GPT 5.5, which right now is essentially the top performing model in the world. We've had Minimax 2.6, Kimi 2.6. We've had the new GML models, and essentially every company. Oh, actually, and Xiaomi yesterday just came out with a new model that is essentially the top open source model now. So every week, every few days, there's a switching of the top.
Yeah.
And it's a little exhausting actually for this industry. But it also, what it shows is that DeepSeek as a company is no longer really the core story for AI in China. It is now just part of half a dozen companies that are essentially about as strong, and all making independent innovations.
So
So yeah.
there's a
Go
race.
ahead.
There are different models, but do you see a breakthrough or something? Okay, you every time when we are talking, you say, "Oh, there's the race is going on," but for me, in my life, nothing has changed in the last month.
Yeah. So I think if you're not in the industry, you can't tell all the things that are happening. But really, I feel like there's been a few major breakthroughs this year, right?
Which
One is
one?
the agentic capabilities of the harnesses that are around agents, and how you're able to now do jobs that it used to be at the end of last year or middle of last year was somewhere like an hour of independent work for these things. The latest models that are coming out have the meter, METR benchmark is now up to about 40 hours of independent work that it can do without human involvement, right?
Mm.
That means essentially you can do a person's 1 week of work by sending in one instruction, one prompt, and it will do a week's of work for what's going on. And it's really just about when can this technology be integrated into the workplace and workflow smoothly, and
Mm.
how do we change the existing company's workflows, right?
Yeah.
And processes. So when that happens, the type of productivity gains is going to be immense. So the other thing is actually memory, both in terms of short and long-term memory. Context windows are getting bigger and bigger, which means that you can fit a lot more content into the consideration set for the models. The other thing is all of these markdown files are now creating long-term memory. So that was one of the biggest missing things in the prior models. Now, essentially, you can have dozens or hundreds of files all being organized in different markdown files, so that you don't lose context and memory between large jobs.
Mm.
So it can go and refactor an entire giant code base, or do big jobs or big analysis without getting confused. And that was something that was not possible just 6 months ago.
But well, there's a lot of change. But if you go out here in the street in Hamburg and Germany and you ask people, "Are you afraid of your job and something is going on?" I think nobody until now says, "Oh, I'm really unhappy. What's going on right now?" We do not see it because people they are quitting their job, are looking for another job. Until now, there's no frustration. Until now, we do not see in the market what's going on. Or
Yeah,
is it only in Germany like that?
I think Europe is a little bit protected from some of these forces. What we're seeing in the US for young people, it is absolutely happening, right? People who are graduating even from the best schools right now are having a really, really tough time finding a job. The unemployment rate in China for new graduates is somewhere around 20%.
20%.
Right? In 20%,
Yeah.
yeah. In the U.S., it's around 7 to 8%, but then the underemployment right now for new graduates in the U.S. is around 50%. In the sense of 7% are unemployed, but then 42% are doing jobs that are far below what a graduate from a college would be doing, going to delivering something on Uber Eats, or going and working in a coffee shop or something like that, right? So people are not necessarily they may be employed, but they're not being gainfully and at the level that they would be happy.
Yeah.
Now the other thing that I think we need to really realize is that job displacement, technology displacement isn't a linear graph in the sense of if it goes up 10% in capability, you don't get 10% more job displacement. What happens is what's called a J curve, and a J curve essentially starts out very, very slow, but once it gets to a critical number, which is probably around 70 to 80% of a job's task being able to be done automatically,
Yeah.
then the replacement goes up a straight line. And and we are right now, if you look at all of the benchmarks for real world work, it's getting to that 60, 70, 80% mark.
Yeah.
And so I think what we will find is that displacement is going to be coming in the next year, much more significantly than we have seen. So we're not seeing the storm that's really underneath the surface right now.
But the storm was already in your family, because I know that I think your daughter, she was she was working in the IT industry, and now what she's doing now right now, and is she happy?
Yeah. So actually, I have two daughters, and one of them was laid off last year because of AI. Because she was doing data analysis, and she had moved to another company. She's doing fine. But the one that actually was doing well at Microsoft, she decided to quit because she's saying every week different friends of hers were getting laid off, and there was so much pressure, and every week they're trying to ask to do more with less. And she said, I don't like this pressure. I don't like being a cog in the machine. And she actually quit to open a coffee shop. And the coffee shop is called Offline Coffee.
Offline
so they're
coffee.
really focused.
Yeah.
Yes, they're focused on getting people to get off of the screen and be face to face with people, and and it's doing very well. By the way, I mean every day there's lines out the door. They're thinking about opening up a second location already. So I'm very happy for her. She's very tired, but she's very happy. So.
And she has used AI for the business plan and to convince banks and all this stuff. And
and for all the legal reviews, for some of the design work, for some of the advertising, so she has a small team, but they look like they have a very big presence, right? And I think this is what's going to be different, is that AI will enable small companies to behave and perform like large companies. And we talked a little bit about that last time. But I think this is going to be something that will increasingly be so, and increasingly easy for small companies, because the interface will just be natural language.
Yeah. And you are happy with that situation, or with the change, because now she's not working as with Microsoft, and she's earning a lot of money, and now she's doing a different job, because as a father in this and then as a society, it's different to have an academic job and then to work in a coffee shop, or as a founder in a coffee shop.
Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest, I was a little bit concerned in the beginning, because I said, look, you spend your entire life, being trained to do what you're doing, and you have a job at one of the biggest and most prestigious companies in the world.
Yeah.
But what I have to say is, after seeing how how her life is, and how her, I guess, her emotional state and her personal satisfaction is, I'm actually supportive now, because I think she's doing what she enjoys. She's finding it meaningful, and she's happy waking up every day to go to work.
Yeah.
Whereas that was not the case. I remember when she first joined Microsoft, every week I would have a coffee with her, and she'd be complaining about all the issues that she has, and why she's frustrated. And now it's about how any advice for how to do this and that, and how can we grow our business, and I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah. Last week there was a news story in a magazine in Germany, and there was written that Google is doing a quite fantastic job. People thought a month ago that this search machine will be destroyed by AI, and now it's the opposite. What are your thoughts about Google or Alphabet?
Yeah, I think right now Google is in a very good position, because they really do have the full stack. They have the users, they have the data, they have access to a lot of computers, as well as a lot of phones around the world, and they have a business that is churning out money with a search. I'm actually, I have to admit, I am a little surprised that the AI has not affected their search business as much as I would have expected, because for people, every friend that I know that's in tech, their usage of search has gone down, 50, 60, 80% from what they used to be. But I think somehow they've been able to maintain the revenue there. I think that I don't know how long that can last. I think that's really the thing. I'm not sure. I think they're going to be a major player because they actually have their own hardware. They don't have the margin pressures that the independent AI labs do. But they also have drawn down significantly their free cash flow and their cash reserves, right? Because they're building so much hardware or so much capex around the world. Which some of the other companies haven't done. Like we talked about Apple before. They've essentially, Apple's spending somewhere in the order of $5 to $10 billion a year in capex. Google and Microsoft and other companies are spending hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So they essentially, it could be that this is still early in the game. That we may still see some issues coming out for Google longer term. And in fact, last week, GPT 5.5 just came out with their new image model, the Image 2.0, which significantly outperforms the Nano Banana model from Google. And Nano Banana was seen as the top, text to image model, and now no longer true, right? So the fact that OpenAI has surpassed them, I think it is alarming for Google.
But it's a race. Maybe in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, Google will surpass again, and we do not know it right now not because we see a lot of change. And you mentioned Apple. We see a new CEO at the top of Apple. And maybe there will be a shift too, or something will happening too. What do you expect when we talk about Apple?
Yeah, I think Apple's actually in a better shape than people think. Everybody says, "Oh, Apple missed the boat on AI." I actually think that they probably made the right move, because when AI right now, what it looks like is that AI is becoming much more commodity. Every model is within 1 or 2% of each other, and they're now able to go and license the best models from everybody for essentially their deal with Google was only for $1 billion per year to get one of the best AI models. And they're getting paid $10 billion a year by Google to provide search on Apple. So they're actually making, on exchange, $9 billion on just cash flow, right? But the other thing is, what you'll find is that Anthropic and probably OpenAI and other companies will come to Apple and say, "Hey, we want to get onto your list too. Let me pay you some money to get onto your list." Right. So this is what they did with search. I think they will probably just do the same thing and just put a different model behind Siri, but Siri is the front end. And I think from that perspective, this is it's cash smart for Apple, but you don't lose control of your customer.
Alvin, what is on your mind this week that we haven't talked about yet? Is there something you want to share with us?
Yeah, so I think one of the topics that's been talked about recently is the Mythos model and how cybersecurity is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And how AI is going to be a tool for national superiority, right? In fact, this was one of the things that was discussed quite a bit when I was in Delphi. And I think that this is something that is that needs to be taken more seriously, because right now everybody thinks that this AI race is really about creating a national advantage. But the problem with that is that when you start to do that, you start creating systems that will be very accessible to bad actors, right? In fact, just in the last 2 weeks, you've had Anthropic, the company who makes Mythos, they leaked their own source code for Cloud Code, one of the most important parts of their business that was worth billions of dollars, right? So there's very bad very bad internal data security, access security. They also, just a couple of days ago, released that their Mythos model had a lot of unauthorized access by users that they did not expect, right? So what this is showing is that, if you try to weaponize this AI, and AI and software is very different than nuclear weapons or hardware, missiles that can be very easily secured and detected. This thing is just essentially one USB stick away or one IP address away from being accessible to anybody in the world. And when that's the case, we really need to think about how do we work as a world against a common threat, which is bad actor misuse, all right, versus state-to-state use. Because right now the focus has been, oh, we get the best model, then we can use it to then spy on our opponents. And when you do that, you create escalate tension. You stop talking to each other. You stop trading information in terms of where the risks are. What we need to do is really to say, okay, we do the same things that we do for terrorist activities, for all of the hackers that are going around the world trying to take down power grids and do ransomware. We should be doing that level of sharing of intelligence between countries, and then go and create shared safety standards and hotlines for making sure we aren't mistaking activities for state activities when they're really bad actors, right? And I think this is one of the things that Xi Jinping and Trump will probably start talking about when they meet in a couple of weeks, is how to make safety better. And how to make sure that be careful of using it in automated weapons, but also how do we share safety so that the world is a safer place overall, even though you maintain certain level of competition on the national security side, but against the common risk, we have to work together.
Yeah, sometimes we have the impression that these guys, they have that they do the right decisions, that they do it. But sometimes, if we have a look at Iran and so on, that the decisions are not quite well. We will have a look. We will have a look what's going on. It's a really big topic, and we have to talk about it. So for me, AI is not waiting. China is not waiting. America is not waiting. Big tech is not waiting. And Europe cannot wait. And you guys, you are listening and watching us, you have to wait 14 days. Then we have the next the next episode, and we will talk about everything. And you say, wow, it's going so fast. And but I'm really happy to have the best expert of the world in our show, Alvin. Thank you very much. I think you told me you have, for the first time in months, slept more than 10 hours, and and you are living in a plane, and it's nice to have you here. And let's have a new episode in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's always fun to chat with you. And then to our audience, please send us more questions. Let us know what you're interested in, and share this episode with your friends. I think there's a lot of useful information here that the world needs to hear and should be starting to talk more about.
And we see each other live in September in Berlin, the Big Bang AI Festival, and we have already 5,000 people have already bought a ticket. Last year there were 500, so there is a lot of interest in our topics. And let's talk about it. And we see each other soon. Thank you very much, Alvin. Thank you very much, everybody.
Take care,
bye. Take care. See you.